compete everywhere, Dennis. Your constituent, tribe, village will compete everywhere. But we will also spend more time in some places than others because we cannot be everywhere at the same time. We cannot equally divide ourselves in all 73 districts at the same time. And so, in fact, this is how we got to think about running the country. We gotta prioritize. We gotta make choices. Some areas will focus on more than others. So we'll compete everywhere, every district in the country, but we are going to spend more time in. That's what we'll do.
Thank you. What will Mr. Cummings do? What are the top 3 things you're going to target during your first 100 days in office if you were fortunate enough?
In no particular order, this will be the top 3 specifically. One is we will provide finance to Liberian business, women Liberian businesses, because credit and financing is the engine for private sector growth and expansion. What caused the global economic crisis in 2008 was the freezing of banks when credit froze. And that's just to say that providing financing to Liberian businesses, Liberian market women is something we'll focus on the first 100 days. Next thing we'll focus on the first 100 days will be we have to invest in our young people. We have to invest in the youth. We have a team right now developing where our program will be specifically. But it will happen. It will be implemented in our first 100 days. We will institutions, Liberia Anti-Corruption Commission, the General Accounting Commission, authorized man staff them. That it will not go after any individual, but we need to just audit what we're inheriting so that parents can see it very transparently, so we know what we're inheriting, and we can correct, fix, and build upon that and move ahead. So that's something that will also happen in the first 100 days. We will make sure the government is fully staffed in the first 100 days. So find potential candidates to lead various ministries and agencies so we can hit the ground running in the first 100 days and not, be wasting time and thinking about who's going to do what. We'll know when we get in the job, and that will happen. Of things we'll do immediately upon taking office.
Mr. Cummings, I didn't hear about the economy, so let me ask you this one. Over the past several years, we have consistently failed the MCC. What will Mr. Cummings do? And also, with unemployment because we've been failing the MCC scorecard and all that. So specifically to the wrong things.
So again, you asked for 3 things, and so I gave you 3.
Okay.
So I can add to the other things, which includes the economy, which in the first 100 days. And let me say that, everybody, as we say in Liberia, everybody, and the economy is an area I know and an area and I'm trained in finance, economics, accounting. So again, that's and it ties into your point about you need money to do all these things. One of the stealing will have to go after the corruption, because that's money that can be redeployed and more productively used. And that's why I mentioned auditing what we're inheriting. But in addition to that, we aggressively go after plugging, if you will, in the revenue buckets and making sure the money is redeployed. By definition, by doing some of that, you will begin to spark economic growth by redeploying funds into the economy. At how we can very quickly make it easy to do business. Again, the economy is tied to everything I mentioned, providing credit, what other rules and regulations, because the Millennium Challenge Corporation also looked at the ease of doing business in Liberia, and we make it very complicated. So we're going to change the environment, we're going to make it easier, we're going to reduce rules and regulations. Let me be specific about the port. We put almost everything we consume, and yet we make it very complicated to import. To look at how can we simplify, can we go to a flat rate system where every container comes to the country at a certain price, no matter what's in it. It's simple, easy to audit, easy to check revenue growth by keeping it simple. Another a specific example of what we will do to grow the economy. We immediately start thinking about how we can invest in agriculture. We will immediately look at starting our agriculture development bank, begin financing, go back to credit, important for all of these things. We'll look at reestablishing Liberia Produce Marketing Corporation because farmers need to have a market buyer for their produce. We will look at reinvigorating the Liberia Agriculture Extension Services so that we can train our farmers in modern ways of agriculture, because our provide jobs, will provide income, will spark economic growth in our country. One of the specifics we'll do is we will establish a separate tourism agency to focus on tourism and culture. And that's a specific action we'll take so that we can begin to focus on tourism. It will create jobs, it will bring income. Action. These things will not all happen in the first 100 days, but we initiate these actions in the first 100 days so we can see the benefit of that. My administration.
So the issue of corruption, you talk about plugging the holes. Specifically, how are you going to do
that? First of all, we are going to punish, there'll be consequences to those people who steal. Because today in Liberia, you can do almost anything, not just stealing, and get away with it. And so, reestablishing rule of law, punishing people who steal. I keep making a statement that I hope somebody close to me does something stupid so we can set an example that we're serious about laws, about consequences for people not obeying the law. So consequences, punishing people who steal, one. Two, we'll use technology. We need to, again, this will not happen on day one, but we need to start thinking about how we can implement e-government, because technology will help us plug the holes with this thing called corruption. The former managing director of National Port Authority was sanctioned by the U.S. government, as you know. That's why I mentioned the port. That's why I mentioned simplifying rules and regulations. It makes it easier to catch. Let me go back to the port example. If we go to a standard cost per container, no matter what we bring in, easy to monitor. If there's 10 containers in the morning, they all by the end of the day, the custom is $1,000 per container, for example. The custom person owes the government $10,000. If he only has 9,000, I don't need a lawyer, I don't need an accountant. He's told $1,000. Simple. So simplicity is how we'll get as this thing for corruption. We gotta pay Liberians a living wage, civil servants. This government I don't pay them consistently every month. So we'll not be able to restore back immediately to where they were before, but we're going to increase civil service salary so they have a living wage. So the incentive to steal is reduced. Because today, by the middle of the month, a teacher, a police officer, healthcare worker, money finish, they are going to do what they need to do to support themselves and their family. So we can pay people a living wage. It will help economic growth. But again, another way we can get to reduce corruption, because then when they do steal, we will go after them and punish them and put them in jail. So those are just some examples how to go after corruption.
Thank you. Let's go to the issue of rice. Quite recently, there was rice shortage on the market. And this issue has been for a long time, 1979, it goes on and on and on. How does a Cummings government intend to address this rice issue that is solved once and for all?
Wow, there's a bigger question, and I'll answer your rice question specifically, Dennis. But there's a bigger question as to why there's so many things in our country that have been a certain way forever, and like we don't change it. Like I keep saying, we keep doing the same thing, expect different results. The other example I like to use, and again, is we know every year there's certain spots that are impassable going from Monrovia State to the southeast. And yet, every year yet, if nothing else, yes, this road should all be paved forever, but it hasn't been. It would seem like since we know there's a particular spot between Kata and Sakle Pier that's always flooded, for example, why don't we just fix those spots so people can pass, right? And year in and year out, the same thing happens. Anyway, let's come to rice. The reason why I talk about the roads and these spots is this question is symptomatic of a lot of things we got to change in Nigeria. But on the rice issue, the long-term solution is to grow our rice. You recall I mentioned agriculture and all the things the Pacifics will do. We gotta focus on growing our rice. It's very imperative. And I won't get into all the details as whether we should become 100% self-sufficient or 50, 80%. There's economic arguments where you can make decisions differently, but the point is, and that's not an immediate solution, but ultimately, that is part of the solution. The second thing we have to do, and it's long term as well, and I'll come to some more immediate actions, is we got to encourage the diversification of our diet, right? So as we improve the agriculture sector, growing, for example, right, in addition to rice, planting, so that we're not and that's a long-term change, right? But we got to start that process, right? So that's another way we can kind of reduce the dependence on rice. On a short-term basis, the government has been subsidizing the price of rice. I don't think that's something we can cut off immediately. Over time, that's something as you grow, right? Want to reduce the amount of subsidy, but the subsidy has to reach the ultimate beneficiary, and that's the Liberian people. And this is where the corruption, the stealing comes, because apparently $13 million was allocated to subsidize the price of rice to keep the price low because the world market price is higher. That money never reached the importers, or all of it didn't reach the importers, and that's what generated this most recent crisis. And they blame everything else. That's the fundamental reason why, because the importers are refusing to import at a loss. And so again, stopping the stealing. If you're going to subsidize, let the money reach so that rice can be in the market. Over time, as we diversify our diet, as we grow our rice, the price of rice may need to be adjusted. But in the short term, given the hardship, it's not practical. We can't afford to starve our and so those are the ways we'll begin to address the whole right issue. And then as you grow the economy, as you create jobs, as wages rise, people will be able to pay more for all of the goods and services, including rice. And that's where you can begin to reduce the amount of subsidy and redeploy that money into other things, like back into agriculture, for example.
Thank you. And I have a question to follow up on that, but if you can adjust your camera a little bit so that there's a little shadow on your face when you kind of move back. So we'll take a short break, a 1 minute break, and then we'll be right back as you make the adjustment. Thank you and
Is
welcome
that
back.
better?
Yeah, that's better. That's better. So Mr. Cummings, as you talk about these things, the economy, the rice issue, the agriculture, and all of that, the question that keeps coming to my mind is, who specifically is on your team? Who are you talking to? Because I know Mr. Cummings doesn't know everything. So who are the people that are on your team that we can look at and say, yes, these are the people that are advising Mr. Cummings on the agriculture issue, on the economy, on healthcare, because those you have around you will give us an idea about how you are thinking about these things as a potential president. So who are the people on your team that are helping you craft policy on, let's say, agriculture, on the economy, and so on and so forth?
So I will be, among other things, early in 2023, we'll start to announce the people we have working on all of these different sectors. And let me tell you why we have to be deliberate and we got to be careful and cautious about who we name. Because as we all know, Dennis, this government will go after these people if they know they're supporting me. Because some of them are either in the government or they do work for the government, they have contracts, or their wives or some family members. And unfortunately, we have an environment where people get punished for their political point of view. And so we want to be careful in naming people publicly. We want their acquiescence, their agreement to do so. It will be a combination of, we're going to actually name more people who will endorse us, who will be part of our campaign team across the country. We'll be naming our subject matter experts across the various sectors. Some of them will choose to remain in the background and will respect that. But I also understand the question and the need for Liberians to know who is on the team, who is helping us, because it will help define the kind of government we'll have. And my commitment is
Mr. Cummings,
that early next year, we'll begin to name those people.
the reason I ask is when I look at your plan, it's still not telling us the how. So I'm wondering if you actually have people in the background who are crafting these policies, basically.
We have people working on the background crafting those policies, but let's talk about the house, though. I mean, when you say, be specific, when you say we're not saying the house, let's talk about agriculture. We're saying we're going to invest in agriculture. How are we going to do that? We're going to set up an agriculture bank to provide. Let me even start over. What do you need to be successful in agriculture? You need to make sure ultimately your farmers are prosperous, that they make money from growing and selling their product. For them to do that, they had to have money to buy seeds, to buy fertilizers, to buy equipment, et cetera, et cetera. How are we going to help them do that? One, as I mentioned, again, this is in no particular order, we'll form farmer cooperatives. We will reinvigorate the agricultural extension services, because when they work together, it will create scale. They can buy fertilizer in bulk, seeds in bulk, equipment, et cetera, et cetera. If we have a financial institution, which we used to have in Liberia, that will provide the financing to do these things. If you re-establish the Liberian Produce Marketing Corporation, so that what you cannot sell domestically, LPMC will buy and export it, you solve the issue of, farmers' products going to waste, spoiling because they don't have somebody to sell it to. So those are some specifics in terms of how we tend to reinvigorate the agricultural sector. And I think that's a clear how.
In picking a vice president, many have in the past gone to what they call vote-rich counties, right? Some will leave their parties and go on what I call efficient expedition of who they think can make them to win. Some look for vice president, like in the United States, they look at area that they has presidential candidates that they are lacking or a little deficient, and they want to find someone to be able to fill that little gap. When it comes to Mr. Cummings picking a running mate, a potential vice presidential running mate, what is your yardstick? What will you be looking for?
So look, it's all of the above, and then it's whether you're in Liberia or any other democratic country that has a similar system of president and vice president, the United States, all of those considerations are part of to look at. One of the things you didn't mention that I would just add to that list, because the list includes everything you said. A person's qualification, the person's history in our country. Are they qualified to be president if something happens to me? That's a major consideration in the mix. But everything else you said, we have to look at geographic balance. We have to look at what constituency the person brings. We had to look at the history of the back, and we have a committee that is working now on identifying the criteria specifically. The committee is identifying potential candidates for the vice presidency. They will interview those people, talk to them, and try to measure them versus the criteria. They will recommend a list of 4 or 5 people for me to choose from. And again, I hope to make that decision, if not by the end of this year, very early next year. But everything you mentioned will be part of the consideration set.
In the case of President Obama, he did not have a foreign policy of experience, so he picked Joe Biden. Is there anything that Mr. Cummings lacks that you'll be looking for in your vice president to make the team strong?
There's no one variable in my mind that outweighs the other. All of these happen because nobody will bring everything to the party.
Right.
And so we will look at what the individuals brings holistically. So if there are 4, 5, 6 things, the criteria, who brings the most is something we'll consider. And of course, something I didn't mention, the chemistry has to work between the person and I. We gotta trust each other, very important consideration. But I'm not looking for any one thing above everything else.
Right.
I'm looking for
But is there an area in you? Is there a place? I use the Joe Biden Obama
so
example.
if there's an area, one, I'm not a typical politician per se, if that's what to describe me. I tend to be an introvert. And people say, oh, the man, not people friendly and all that sort of stuff, which is not true, but I'm an introvert. So I want somebody who's more of an extrovert, who has a different personality from me. I don't want another Alex Cummings, right? So those are some of the personality considerations that I would be looking for in the vice presidency.
Some say you lack a public service experience in Liberia. Will you be looking at someone with public service experience in Liberia?
Yes, but with a caveat.
Okay.
So yes, but the but is when you look at people who have had public service experience and you look at our public sector today, what has it delivered? The system has delivered one of the poorest countries in Africa. By any objective measure, right, our country is in the bottom in almost every way measured, even though we're 175 years old. So yes, we got to think about public service, but what kind of public service experience, what results have they delivered? Because our public service has not delivered for Liberian people. That's just a fact, right? So I don't want to overplay this public service thing. It's not unimportant. That experience has some value, but let's not overplay because public service in Liberia today has not delivered for Liberian people. Fact.
Thank you. Mr. Cummings, you just appointed Team Cummings 2023. And we didn't get to know, first of all, what's the purpose of that team? We did not hear any structure who's going to be doing that. So what's the purpose? And what did you look for to be able to put this team together? What each individual person is bringing to the table?
That team comprised of people who came and wanted to support us. Some we reached out to and asked, but a majority of them are people who said, we believe in your vision. We believe that the biggest challenge facing our country is the economy. And we believe of the choices we have, you're the best person to address the economy, great jobs for our people. And we have a point of view that we want to build a big tent, and anybody who puts the hand up and want to come and support us and endorse us, we're going to embrace, we're going to welcome. And so the majority of people named were people who are supporting us and wanted to come and make it public. I mentioned some of the challenges of going public and supporting the opposition candidate, but these people wanted to do that. Let me also say that we will have others who will be naming and announcing. In the next several weeks, other people will put their hands up and they will come and join the effort. In fact, we want to almost go on a county by county basis, people who are identifying us and want to support us. And that's something we'll embrace and we'll support. We have a campaign team that, and we have a political institution, the CPP, the ANC, the Liberty Party that we're working with. And we have a CPP chair, as you know, we have an ANC chair, we have structures, right? But the campaign team is being organized as we speak. And we'll be announcing more specifically the roles in the campaign organization as we go forward. But majority of the people we name are people who wanted to come and go public with their support for us.
Right. So this is a campaign team. So was there any vetting? And so what specifically were you looking for to put a campaign team together? Just anybody who come, or what is it?
So yeah, as I mentioned, the initial list, and I emphasize the word initial, was mostly people who volunteered and wanted to come support us. You know, there are some visuals, and what I say to people is that when we change the environment, when we change the way rules are applied, many of the people who are considered quote unquote bad will follow the rules. I often say, if you take Liberians, Dennis, and you bring them to the United States or the UK or other countries, and they follow the rules. The same people, same us, right? And so I hear some of the criticisms about some of the people, and what I say to them, and I say to you, I say to Liberians, when we change the environment, when we change the expectations, when we change the rules, these are the people and others that will help to transform the country. The country is what it is. I'm not running for president of just good people. I'm running for president of Liberia. And any Liberian who wants to support me will be welcome, but they will understand that the rules will be applied to them. The consequences for disobeying the rules will be applied to them. Whether you came early, whether you supported me or not, is beside the point. We will work together to change the country, change the rules, change the expectations, and everybody will be expected to follow. So
Mr.
everybody
Cummings,
is
I hate
welcome
to
to
do
come
this.
and join the Cummings team, the Cummings campaign. Please come and put your hands up and come join us.
I hate to do this, but you're a corporate guy, and you understand recruitment. You understand vetting when you're bringing people on board to perform a specific task. This is a campaign team, so it is not just because they came. It's because you were looking for something, right? So I want to get specifically what is it that you want from this campaign team that you are looking for as you put it together. We have, thousands of Liberians, and you chose the initial or number. So what is specifically?
So that list, and it's a fair question, by the way. So don't apologize for asking it. The campaign team will consist of people doing multiple things. Some will just mobilize and recruit in their neighborhoods, in their communities. Some will have more specific tasks, will be in communications, will be in finance. But a lot of them will just mobilize in the church, in the mosque, in the communities, in all around the country. And then some will have more specific tasks because they bring skills, they bring accountability, etc. So it'll be a combination of all of that. This first list was about people who were willing to volunteer, to come and support us, and we make no apologies about embracing them, because, as I mentioned, many people have been afraid to go public because the fear of being punished by this government. And you will see a whole different mix of people. Some of them seem like came in first, and others, as we grow this tent, as people come to support us. I'm a corporate guy. When you go to make changes and restructure, you don't change everybody in the organization. You change a few people, you put a few key people in roles, and the same people you met there change the environment, change the expectations, change the structure, and those people are the ones who give you different results. I've been through multiple restructurings in my public life. And yes, you make some changes, you hire some people, but the bulk of the people you inherit in that corporation are the ones that will change the business. And so the same concept applies to the campaign and to how we change Liberia.
Thank you. Mr. Cummings, have you read the TRC report? If yes, are you aware that the NPFL, for instance, is responsible for 63,000 plus violations, and that some of the people that you name of the team have been indicted in the TRC report for crimes? Are you aware of that?
Yes. I mean, as I mentioned, people volunteered to come and support us. Those people know that when we implement the War Economics Crime Court, if the evidence leads in that direction, that's where the evidence will lead. And I'll make it clear to you and to your audience that, again, all Liberians are welcome to come and support Alexander Cummings. Strong advocate for the War Economics Crime Court. In fact, we issued a statement a week and a half ago to reiterate that point. And when that entity is established, and wherever the evidence leads, whether you came early, you came late, you supported me or not, if the evidence leads to you, the evidence leads to you, and the consequences will be meted out to you, but it will be based on the facts and will be based on the evidence.
What the NPFL, because I've heard that you want to grow a big tent, and therefore, but unfortunately, only people in this big tent are people who are former or connected to the NPFL. Why didn't the big tent include some people from ULIMO, from Model, from LUR, from AFL, to be able to actually increase this tent?
So I don't, you didn't hear, or maybe I wasn't clear. Both in the announcement, and as I said earlier, this is an initial list of people. I also said when we made the announcement that even the order that we named people didn't mean anything. It was just the order we named them, and that more people will be named. Every Liberian will see themselves in this tent. Every kind of affiliation, past affiliation, current affiliation, every tribe, ultimately, every gender, every religion, every Liberian will see themselves represented in this list of people. So again, maybe I should emphasize this an initial list. This is not the only list. And as I also mentioned a few minutes ago, Dennis, in the next 2-3 weeks, we'll be announcing more people. And every Liberian will be able to see themselves across the country in a list of people that will come to support us.
There has been actually an outcry against especially certain people on the list. And here are a few of them because of the role, right? So there have been this outcry. I remember when your former Chief of Office Staff, Mr. Isaac Vatogba, co-authored a book in which he quoted then celebrity George Weah as making some remarks. Few people got in the streets to demonstrate, and based on that, you fire Mr. Togba from his job. Based on the outcry from the people about these alleged war crimes perpetrators, will you be taking similar actions?
So, one, you use a keyword alleged, and two, because you keep sort of, I think, in my mind, repeating the same point. People are volunteering to come and help and support us. We are building this big tent of Liberians. Liberians are made up of good people and bad people. Most countries in the world, Dennis, that have rule of law, where people who disobey the law, there are consequences. Most of the citizens follow the law. I mentioned same Liberians. If you take them out of Liberia, you put them in countries where the law is enforced, they follow the rules, they follow the law. When we change the system in Liberia, many of these people who are alleged to be bad, I believe will follow the rules, follow the law. And if the evidence leads to the allegations being true, they will bear the consequences of it. I'm saying that to you. I'm said that Liberian people publicly. I've issued statements that in fact recently, and I'm very clear and deliberate about that. But we cannot win with just the good people in Liberia. We got to win with all Liberians. And I wanted to be president of everybody, not just a few people.
You've been sold to the Liberian people as clean hands. Of late, and Mr. Clean, of late, you've been saying, I'm not perfect. You have listened to some of your speeches where you repeated that. Are you trying to lower the expectations of Mr. Clean, or are you trying to, I don't want to use the word justify, are you trying to sound blow a whistle that you're going to be spending some time with those who are being perceived as not clean?
Dennis, one statement has nothing to do with the other. I mean, are you perfect?
No, I'm not.
So I'm not. It doesn't mean I lack, integrity or, but I'm not perfect. I was just making a statement. The statement was in the context of, because some Liberians have this idealistic view. And I made that statement in the context, Jesus Christ is not running for president of Liberia. Muhammad is not running for president of Liberia. That all the people running for president are flawed. We are flawed men. Right now, no leading women I'm aware of anyway. So my point in making that statement was, you're not going to have perfection. There are things about me some people are not going to like. There's some things about me that you mentioned earlier. I don't know everything. And that's why you need advisors and that kind of stuff. So the statement was only made in that context. It was not meant to justify or rationalize or whatever. The two had nothing to do with the other, because none of us are perfect. And it was a reminder to Liberians that when they make up stuff, when they come up with all of these things, it's like, but what about everybody else, right? So that was the context for the word, or for the description, if you will.
Oh, I think a month or so ago, Senator Prince Wise Johnson announced that some years ago you gave him or his university $55,000. That was not reported. We did not know about it because it was not publicized. But you've been publicizing other donations, like the one to AMEU, the students in Harper, University of Liberia, community college in Nimba. Why was the money given to Prince Johnson? Why was it not publicized? Why we didn't know until Prince Johnson have to come up to say it?
So there are many donations I make that is not publicized. Many. Okay. That donation was, first of all, it was not $55,000. I think it was around $25,000 or so, somewhere in that range.
You say
that money, but it's not true. I'm telling you, I gave the money. So
okay.
What the facts are. That money was given in 2017 for his institution, for his school. And as you mentioned, we give money to other institutions. Some are public, some are not. We give a lot of help and support to individuals. I don't normally give or help because I want approbation, because I want recognition. We do it because we've been blessed, because we can help, and because we see there's a need. So there was no ulterior motive. There was no hidden agenda. There's no secret. We gave his institution, an education institution, money for his school. So there was no ulterior motive for not making it public, because it's not a secret. It's not nothing I'm ashamed of. Anybody who is investing in education, who looks for our help, and we think it is merited, we will provide them help and support.
I'm just curious how you decide which one to be public and which one not to be public.
There's no overt criteria for saying making this public or making it not public. Sometimes we make it public, sometimes we don't.
Time is fast spent. Let me quickly rush through a few of the current issues that are happening, and we'll come to the Elections Commission. From what we see, the timetable was announced, which we clearly will show that things appear very unrealistic when you look at the elections timetable. We see the problem with ledges, and we see that census is just almost impossible because census data, you need to use the census data for the elections, and you are having the census have, what are you doing? We've not seen, any serious effort on the part of you and the collective opposition to be able to sound a clear alarm, because I'm right. At what point are you going to maybe take serious actions to call the government to book?
So again, in your research, I'm sure you discovered that we were the first, and I think only, first of all, the need for the census to be done, that the government had, not followed our constitution by having the census done in 2018 and had delayed it. So we were the first and only to talk about and demand the need for census. Perhaps that call is the reaction we've gotten today, where they're trying to rush it. But let me say to you very specifically that next week we will be speaking to all of these issues, to the ineptitude, the incompetence that is happening with the conduct of the of the census. We'll be speaking to the whole issue of the biometric, the fact that despite the PCC objection to using this Chinese firm for the biometric equipment, the NEC is insisting on doing that. I don't understand why. Again, another example of the rules not being followed, the process not being followed. So we'll be speaking very specifically and very forcefully to all of that as early as next
Cummings, as you can see, speaking really has not been able to cut it. I saw that when your name was being dragged in this fraud charges, you went above and beyond to clear your names. What will it take for Mr. Cummings to maybe put people in the street to demonstrate and make sure that these things are not going well in the country, and we need to take a strong stance?
We may do that, but I first want to, go the statement route. We may ultimately end up, protesting. So I don't rule that out. But that's not the first place I want to go. And so, as I mentioned, next week we'll start to speak about it. We'll start to speak about it forcefully. Because even before you put people on the street, you gotta make the case as to why. People gotta understand the importance of this and what it means to them in the future. And so, starting with the statements, starting with the press conferences, is the way you begin to galvanize interest, to galvanize people, to reach out to the international community, which we'll do. And then ultimately, yes, it may lead to that. But let's go through the process and not prematurely, jump to that.
So what will it take to jump to that?
Let's see how the government reacts after we issue the statements and we call the press conferences and we build up support and we rally the international community. Let's see if they make adjustments, if they change things, then protesting may or may not be necessary.
There's a story about 11-year-old Tracy who was kidnapped. 11-year-old Tracy, a girl who was kidnapped and circumcised in Calcutta. There's a 2-year-old boy sodomized by a 14-year-old who was in his care in And also in Bond County, there is a husband, Kokolu, who killed his wife, or Nowai, because, for some. What specifically will a Cummings government do to stop these acts of violence against women and children when you are fortunate to be president? Will you, for instance, enforce a ban on FGM? Give me some concrete examples of what you're going to do to fight this violence against women and children.
So the bigger picture here is that we live in a country where nobody gets punished for doing anything, where you can commit all the acts you just described, and you can get away with it. And this is part of the kind of the lawlessness in Liberia. And in a Cummings administration, the rule of law will apply. Sexual and gender-based violence will not be tolerated. People will go to jail, people will be punished, people will be investigated. Women will not be re-victimized. We will be very clear. Again, when you asked about the 100-day plan, the second go round of the questions, I talked about rule of law. You gotta fix the environment. You gotta fix the expectations. You gotta set the examples. You have to professionalize law enforcement and let them follow the evidence. And ultimately, people have to know they will be punished for committing these acts and any other acts of violence. We also got to engage the Liberian people in this effort, because oftentimes families will get together and like, oh, there's your uncle, your brother, your father. You can't do that. We have to have this conversation. Any of these acts by anybody has to be punished, has to be consequences for that. And that's something we are passionate about, we care about, and we will make sure rule of law applies in every way, but specifically to sexual and gender-based violence.
I asked about FGM.
What about FGM?
Will you enforce a ban to ban FGM?
We will look at FGM, and yes, we will enforce a ban on FGM.
Mr. Cummings, who's your all-time favorite president of Liberia?
Well, I was a very young man when President Tubman was president. So of the presidents I've experienced, I would say Tolbert, because I was a young adult, was perhaps our best president of the one I've experienced.
Because of time, let me ask you my last question. We saw an exchange between you and President Weah back and forth, letters exchange. What did you set to accomplish by that exchange? Exchanging letters with President Weah, who obviously have not demonstrated much enthusiasm in reading. And what did you set to accomplish? And have you been able to realize the objective at the end of the letter exercise?
Yeah, so the letter was written to try to be constructive. The letter made recommendations to the president. The president responded, and I think in a way that was not becoming of him, of the office. And we decided we were going to take him on in our response to his response to mine. We challenged him in that response to a debate, and he has not responded to that. But what I hope it shows the Liberian people and the world at large is that we're prepared to call the president out for his mismanagement of the country. In the process, we also always try to make recommendations and offer solutions. But I hope the Liberian people see and saw that our president doesn't understand his job. He's not leading our country. I think through that exchange, the incompetence and the attitude of the president and his government, and I hope Liberians and other supporters of Liberia see that we have an alternative. Somebody who understands the issues, who has the experience, the skills, capability, desire, and the passion for changing our country, and who will fight for Liberians and would take on anybody. In this case, the president who is mismanaging our country, which is resulting in the suffering of our country and of our people.
Mr. Cummings, thank you very much. Before I let you go, can you commit to here at FOL we do debate so that we can debate the issues? We hope to see you back. Can you commit to a debate with either Councillor Gongo, Mr. Boakai, or any of our presidential candidates right here on Focus on Liberia?
I would be happy to come on Focus on Liberia. It will all depend on the circumstances, who else will be on the topics, has can be facilitated. So as you know, I'm not afraid to discuss any subject with anybody. In fact, I think in 2017 it was my debate performance that actually propelled my candidacy, even though it was very young. So then it all depends on how you structure it and how you organize. And if we satisfy the rules and conditions, we'll come on. If we're not, we'll try to negotiate, get it right. But it all depends on how you structure it.
Thank you so much. So sorry. When President Doe came to power, they asked him, "What's your policy?" He said, "No new policy. We'll do the same policy." President Weah was in during the summer. He said, "We fired Louis Brown because he doesn't know diplomacy." Liberian foreign diplomacy. Our policy is we vote with the United States. What is Mr. Cummings' foreign policy? You don't have to answer that question. Think about it the next time we come back, because I don't want to keep you 1 minute above your time. And then who are the people on your team that we can look at and have an idea of what will drive your foreign policy agenda? Thank you so much for coming. Let's hear your closing comments and we'll take leave of you.
Yeah, no, thank you. Look, thank you for the very spirited conversation. What I want Liberians to know is that we can change our country. Liberia deserves better, but we have to make choices. And Liberia will not change because we talk it, I talk it, you talk it. It will change because we do the work and we make the sacrifice. And so we want to build this big tent of all Liberians who are prepared to follow the rules, do the work, make the sacrifices, and then we'll change our country. But thank you for the conversation.
Thank you so much. Stay tuned. Right after this conversation, we're going to have a post-debate analysis on Tough Talking Thursday. Again, Mr. Cummings, we are glad you came. Thank you to our viewers, and thanks for all those working in the background to make this possible. On behalf of all of us here at Focus on Liberia, we have just 1 hour with Mr. Cummings. We hope we could talk more, but we're going to be discussing this on Tough Talking Thursday. Stay tuned. Join us right here on Focus on Liberia. Until then, I'm going to close with the song that says, "We are all Liberians." See you soon.
We are Liberians. Liberia is our home.